Hi everyone, today we'll be going over accounts October-November 2020, paper 3-1, question number 3. This is structure paper 3, which consists 6 questions, each of 25 marks, and we are also given a time limit of 3 hours. So we will be attempting to solve each question under 30 minutes, and this question number 3 is part of section A, which deals with financial accounting. Now without any further delay, let's get started. Maria is a trader based in Manila, and she uses the services of two agents, Nakula in Jakarta and Pedro in Madrid. Okay, so in this case, Maria would be a consignor, right? And then Nakula and Pedro would be the consignee. Alright, then during the year ended 31st March 2020, Maria sent goods costing 100 per unit to both Nakula and Pedro, and further information about these consignments are given below. So the goods sent on consignment, the sales made by each of the agents or consignee, and the freight costs paid by the consignor and consignee, and the selling costs beared by the consignees are given here. And we're also told that there is a profit on consignment. Okay, then we're given the rate of commission for Nakula but not for Pedro, so that is something that we need to figure it out. And then we're given the inventory at 31st March 2020, which is the closing inventory. We are given that for Pedro to be 0, but we need to figure our inventory for Nakula. Okay, let's have a look at our question. First of all, we need to prepare the following in Maria's books of accounts. So we need to prepare consignment to Nakula account and consignment to Pedro account. This is fairly simple, so we just need to record all of these items in our consignment to Nakula as well as consignment to Pedro account. And while recording so, we only record our sales made and then the closing inventory on our credit side, right? All of the remaining items such as goods on consignment, freight costs, selling costs, profit on consignment, and rate of commission will be recorded on our debit side of the consignment account. So all of the other items such as goods on consignment, freight costs, selling costs, rate of commission, as well as profit on consignment will be recorded on the debit side. So this is pretty easy, right? So let's create our consignment account. Consignment to Nakula. Okay, so I'm just going to create a line right here. This will be the debit side, this will be the credit side. And since we already figured out that on our credit side, we only include the sales value and inventory, let's record these two items. So we have sales value for Nakula to be 4,000. And since we're preparing consignment to Nakula account, we only look at values on this particular column. So sales value is 4,000 and the closing inventory, we need to figure it out. So closing inventory will act as our balancing figure in this case. Let's write it down. We have the sales value, and this sales is made by Nakula, which amounted to 4,000. And then we have our closing inventory. So closing inventory in a consignment account is always recorded as balance CD, and we need to figure it out. So all the other items will be on our debit side. Let's have a look above. So the items we need to include is goods on consignment amounting to 6,000. Let's write it down on our debit side. So that is goods on consignment with the value of 6,000. Okay, let's have a look above. Then we have freight charges paid by Maria. And since we are preparing these consignment account in Maria's books of accounts, we can record this freight cost as bank. And this amounts to 600. Let's write it down. So that's bank. And this is the freight charges, which amounted to 600. Let's have a look above. And here we can ignore the freight cost paid by Pedro since we are creating the consignment account to Nakula, right? Then we can move to our selling cost paid by Nakula, which amounted to 400. And since this is paid by Nakula, this should be recorded under the heading of his particular name. Let's do that. So that's going to be Nakula. This is the selling expenses, and this amounted to 400. Let's have a look above. So we are done with our freight cost, our selling cost, and we are given the rate of commission to be 18%. And this rate is applicable on the total sales. So let's figure out the commission for Nakula. That is just going to be 18% of the sales made by him, and we know that the sales made by him was 4,000. So we can just multiply 4,000 with our rate of commission of 18%, which we can write down as 0.18. Now this gives his commission to be 4,000 times 0.18, which results in the value of 720. And this commission should also be recorded on the debit side of our consignment account. So let's do that. We have Nakula, and this is his commission, and we figured it out to be 720. Okay, now finally we can record our profit on consignment as well, which amounted to 460. And profit is always recorded on the debit side, but if it were to be lost on consignment, that would have been recorded on the credit side. Let's do that. Profit on consignment, and this is 460. Okay, we've recorded all of the items to be recorded in the consignment account. So now we just have to figure out our balance CD, which is the value of our closing inventory. And in order to figure it out, we require the total amount. And for that, we will add all of these values for the debit side. So the total is going to be 6,000 plus 600 plus 400 plus 720 plus 460, which results in the value of 8,180. And this total will be the same for credit side as well. Now this balance CD will act as a balancing figure, and whenever we're trying to figure out the value for balancing figure, we just need to subtract this value from the total. So in this case, that's going to be 8,180 minus 4,000, which results in the value of 4,180. Okay, so this is the closing inventory for this particular year, right? But this will act as an opening inventory for the next year. So we need to record it as our opening inventory. And if the closing inventory is on the credit side, then the opening inventory will be on the debit side. So that's balance BD with the exact same amount of 4,180. Okay, so this concludes the first part of consignment to Nakula account. Now we can move towards our consignment to Pedro account. Okay, I'm just going to create a line here as well. And we will repeat the same process as we did to Nakula. Okay, so on the credit side, that will be the sales and inventory, and we can see that there is no inventory for Pedro, so the only item to be recorded on the credit side will be that of sales. And the sales made by Pedro amounted to 28,000, so let's record this value. So that's Pedro, and this is the sales made by him, which amounted to 28,000. Now let's move towards recording all of our other values on the debit side. So the goods sent on consignment to Pedro amounted to 15,000. Let's record this on our debit side. Goods on consignment. This amounted to 15,000. Okay, let's have a look above. Then we are given the freight cost paid by Pedro, and this amounted to 1,600. So let's record it as well. And since this is paid by Pedro, we should be recording this under his name. So that's Pedro freight costs, which amounted to 1,600. Let's have a look above. Then we have the selling costs paid by Pedro, which amounted to 1,200. Again, since this is being paid by him, we need to record this under his particular name. So that's going to be Pedro selling costs, and this amounted to 1,200. Let's have a look above. Then we have the profit on consignment of 7,400, and in case of Pedro's consignment account, the balancing figure will be that of his commission. So let's write it down. We need to figure out Pedro's commission, but we already know that the profit on consignment was 7,400. Okay, so in this case the balancing figure is right here, and in order to figure out the balancing figure we require the total, and we know that our credit side is completed, so the total is just going to be this value, 28,000, and the total is going to remain the same for the debit side as well. So now we need to figure out our commission, which will act as the balancing figure, and in order to figure out the value for the balancing figure, we just need to subtract all of these values from our total. So in this case, that's going to be 28,000 minus 15,000 minus 1,600 minus 1,200 minus 7,400, which results in the value of 2,800. Okay, and we can see that there is no closing balance of any inventory, so there is not going to be any opening balance as well, which means that this concludes our consignment to Pedro account as well as the first part of this question. Now we can move towards the second one. Okay, we need to calculate the rate of commission paid to Pedro. This is very simple. So in order to figure out the rate of commission, we could just divide the commission amount by the total sales made by Pedro and then multiply it with 100%. So let's have a look at our consignment to Pedro account. We can see that the sales amounted to 28,000, whereas the commission amounted to 2,800. So let's substitute these two values into our formula. The commission was 2,800 and the sales was 28,000 times 100%. So this gives the rate of commission paid to Pedro to be 2,800 divided by 28,000 times 100%, which results in the value of 10%. Alright, this concludes the second part of this question. Now we can move towards the third one. By the accounting year end, Pedro had remitted to Maria all of the monies due to her from the consignment. However, Nakula had made no remittances of monies to Maria. So Nakula is yet to pay to Maria, whereas Pedro already settled all of the due money. Now for the third part of this question, we need to prepare the following in Maria's books of accounts. The first one is Nakula account. Okay, again, this is very simple as well. So we've already created the consignment to Nakula account, right? So we just need to substitute the values regarding Nakula from that particular account to the Nakula account now. So let's have a look at our consignment to Nakula account. So we can see that his names are recorded for selling, for commission, and for sales made, right? And we know the rule of two ledgers. Okay, so if this is A account and this is B account, and if B is being recorded on the debit side under A's ledger, then A will be recorded on the credit side under B's ledger. So we're just going to repeat this rule from our consignment to Nakula account to Nakula account. So we can see that the sales made by Nakula is recorded on the credit side in the consignment to Nakula account, which means that the consignment to Nakula account will be recorded on the debit side with the same value of 4,000 under Nakula's account. So let's do that. So we have consignment to Nakula account with the value of 4,000. Okay, let's have a look above. Again, we have Nakula on the debit side amounting to 400. So this will be recorded in Nakula account under the heading of consignment to Nakula account with the same value of 400 on the credit side. So let's do that. We have consignment to Nakula account amounting to 400. Now we have our last one, and that is Nakula on the debit side with the amount of 720, which means that this will be recorded in our Nakula account under the heading of consignment to Nakula account with the same amount of 720, but in the opposite side, which will be the credit side. So let's do that. So now we have consignment to Nakula account, and this amounted to 720. Okay, and what we know is that Nakula is yet to pay the amount owing to Maria, right? So that will act as a balancing figure, and this will always be present on the credit side of Nakula account or any consignee account, so that we can record as balance CD, and this will act as a balancing figure now. So in order to figure this value, we require the total, right? So we figure out the total from the debit side. That's just going to be 4,000. And this will be the total for credit side as well. And now balance CD will be the balancing figure. And in order to figure out any balancing figure, we just need to subtract these values from the total. In this case, that's 4,000 minus 400 minus 720, which results in our balancing figure to be 2,880. And this just reflects the amount of money that Nakula needs to pay to Maria, right? And since this is yet to be paid, so this will act as our opening balance for next year. We need to record it under the heading of balance brought down with the same value of 2,880. Okay, this concludes the Nakula account. Now we can move towards Pedro account. Okay, so now we just repeat the same process that we did for Nakula. So let's have a look at consignment to Pedro account. We can see that Pedro is being mentioned here, and this amounts to 28,000. So this is on the credit side, right? Which means that in Pedro account, this value of 28,000 will be recorded on the heading of consignment to Pedro account, but on the opposite side, which is the debit side now. So let's do that. We have consignment to Pedro account. And this reflects the sales made amounting to 28,000. Okay, let's have a look above again. We have Pedro on the debit side amounting to 1600. So under Pedro account, this value of 1600 will be recorded under the heading of consignment to Pedro account, but on the opposite side, which is the credit side. Let's do that. So that's consignment to Pedro account, and this reflects the freight charges of 1600. Let's have a look above. Then we're given Pedro again on the debit side amounting to 1200. So this will be recorded under the credit side under the heading of consignment to Pedro account. Let's do that. So again, that's consignment to Pedro account. This reflects the selling charges paid by him amounting to 1200. Let's have a look above. Then finally, we have our commission, and this amounts to 2800. Since this is recorded on the debit side, on the Pedro account, we will be recording this amount of 2800 under the heading of consignment to Pedro account, but on the opposite side, which is the credit side. Let's do that. We have consignment to Pedro account. This reflects his commission amounting to 2800. Okay, and then finally there will be our balancing figure. So let's have a look at our information. We were told that Pedro had remitted to Maria all of the monies due to her, which means that he already paid all of the amount. So this payment can be recorded under the heading of bank, and this will in fact be our balancing figure. So in order to figure out our balancing figure, we require the total. Let's figure out the total from the debit side. That's just going to be 28,000. And we know that this total will be the same for the credit side as well. So now in order to figure out this balancing figure, we just need to subtract all of these values from our total. So in this case, that's going to be 28,000 minus 1600 minus 1200 minus 2800, which results in the bank value to be 22,400. And since Pedro has already paid, there is nothing to be paid for the next year. So this means that there is not going to be any opening balance for next year, which means that this concludes Pedro account as well as the third part of this question. Now we can move towards the fourth one. Okay, for the fourth part of this question, we need to explain how unsold goods held by an agent are valued. So we know that generally inventories are valued at the lower of cost and their net realizable value, but since we're talking about a consignment, there is an additional freight charges, insurance charges, and all of that, right? So we need to add those values in order to figure out our true cost. So let's write it down. At lower of cost plus the relevant portion of the costs of getting the inventory into a position and condition to sell and net realizable value. So essentially this is just the comparison between the cost and net realizable value. But in this case, the cost also includes all of those freight charges, insurance charges that is required in order to get the inventory into the position and condition to sell. This concludes the fourth part of this question. Now we can move towards the fifth one. We need to calculate the number of units held in inventory by Nakula at 31st March 2020. So in order to figure out the number of units, we can just divide our inventory value. So this inventory value will be the balance CD value that we included in our consignment to Nakula account, and then we just divide it with the cost per unit. Okay, let's have a look at the above information. So firstly, we need to figure out our total cost. Okay, let's write it right here, total cost. And this is the cost for inventory, which means that this should not be including any of our selling and distribution charges, right? So we're talking about Nakula. So the cost will include the goods sent on consignment of 6,000, right? This will definitely not include the sales. Then we have freight cost. This will definitely be included. Then we have the selling cost. So this cost should not be included as it is only associated with the sold goods rather than our unsold inventories. So I think, yeah, that's the only cost to be included. So that's the goods sent on consignment plus the freight charges. That's 6,000 plus 600. Let's write it down. So this results our total cost to be 6,000 plus 600, which results in the value of 6,600. Okay, and since this is the total cost, now in order to figure out the cost per unit, we just need to divide it with our total number of units. So cost per unit is the total cost of 6,600 divided by the total number of units. And we are not given exactly the number of units, but we are given the information stating that each unit costed 100, right? And we know that the total for goods on consignment was 6,000. So number of units is just going to be the total value of the goods sent on consignment, which is 6,000, divided by the per unit cost, which is 100. So this gives our number of units to be 60. Now, in order to figure out our cost per unit of inventory, we just need to divide the total cost of 6,600 with our number of units, which is 60. And this gives our cost per unit to be 110. So this is the value that we need to divide our total inventory valuation with in order to figure out the number of inventories. So let's have a look at our inventory value. So that's balance CD, which amounted to 4,180. Now let's substitute these two values in order to figure out the total number of inventories. So that's going to be the inventory value of 4,180 divided by the cost per unit, which we just figured out to be 110. And now this gives the number of units held in inventory by Nakula at 31st March 2020 to be 4,180 divided by 110, which results in the value of 38. So that's the number of units. Okay, this concludes the fifth part of this question as well as this entire question. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.